Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I hope you had a great weekend. We got a bit of rain, but it's still quite warm at midday. My piece over the weekend was called World's End. I started quoting Antonio Gramsci. The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. There is certainly a fin de siècle, an even apocalyptic mood afoot. The conundrum for those who wish to bet on the end of the world is this. However, what would be the point? The world would have ended. I learned that in the last 44 years we have achieved what we haven't in all this while, a mass annihilation of our fellow earthlings. Between 1970 and 2014, Earth lost nearly 60% of the mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians, almost all of it due to human activity. What with the biblical cyclone in Mozambique, it's all too easy to think like Pompeo, that the moment of rapture might well be upon us. From that took me to the second coming, and I'm not going to read it in its entirety, but just the relevant stanzas. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. The ceremony of innocence is drowned, the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. I was the most innocent human being, President Trump told Sean Hannity, and the entire claque WikiLeaks Greenwald et al. Did a Hamlet. The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Over in the United Kingdom, the Brexit story continues to play out longer than the longest Oresteia. The Oresteia is a trilogy of Greek tragedies written by Aeschylus, and I've watched the play and it's long. Mrs. Theresa May, who has been previously characterized as a bot, brought her May deal for the third time, only for it to be rejected again. She is proposing to bring it a fourth time this week. Sterling retested the 130 level. There are two schools of thought. The majority view is that we have had an eternity to price everything into the pound, and all the bad news is baked into the price now, and therefore this is a Yaz moment, who famously sung "The Only Way is Up." The minority position, about 20% versus 80%, is saying there is a chance that what is soft will become hard, Brexit, and brittle, and therefore there is a risk the whole edifice will come crashing down and career off course. The theatre of the UK Parliament is, I am ashamed to admit, rather more interesting than was the Oresteia. Further afield, the head of the army in Algeria is trying to remove President Bouteflika, the wheelchair-bound, who might be remembered in the history books as Bouteflika the Sticky. Article 102 of Algeria's constitution allows the Constitutional Council to declare the presidency vacant if the incumbent is too ill to exercise his functions, then ask Parliament to declare him unfit. In Africa in particular, a lot of leadership is in the departure lounge, but Bouteflika is surely the most extreme example. Sun Chartist, whom I follow on Twitter, said this: the premise of ZERP and NERP was always these are temporary measures for atrial fibrillation of the economy. 10 years later, the same medicine in ever larger dosage to keep the patient alive, the definition of a vegetative state. The bond market is surely in a vegetative state. The market value of global negative yielding bonds rose $518 billion on Thursday to $10.42 trillion, and is just $1.75 trillion away from a record high. Japan and Germany account for 64% of negative yielding bonds. It is worth pointing out that Japan and Germany are being paid to borrow money. The central bank has flipped and administered vast doses of drugs to its patient. And the level of dissonance in the bond market is now unprecedented. Just about everything rallied in Q1, following on from an annus horribilis in 2018. Quarter 1 2019 was a quarter mirabilis. Central banks, as I said, administered huge doses of drugs. Just about everything from crude oil up 31% to frontier market debt, Kenya plus 10%, has been pumped up. This cannot last, notwithstanding the fact that somehow it's been going on for a decade. Eventually, this zombification will end, and only the debris will be left. The latest signal of stress is being emitted by Turkey, where Erdogan pronounced, "I'm in charge," the day after the overnight rate clocked an eye-popping 1,336%. He added that Turkey had thwarted attacks by the United States and the West on the lira, and he accused some banks of playing games with the currency ahead of Sunday's vote. They can't find lira now. They are struggling in terms of payments. The tables have turned. While they can't do this, the lira firms and the dollar falls, Erdogan said. His lack of analysis of the situation is his Achilles heel. President Erdogan will learn what Norman Lamont learned, and the Turkish lira is teetering at the precipice. Now, if the lira crashes, which looks very likely, the infection will spread out of Istanbul. We could see a major wobble, a flight to quality, and in that environment you might well want to own some yen. I spoke about the rapture. It is an eschatological concept of certain Christians consisting of an end-time event when all Christian believers who are alive will rise along with the resurrected dead believers into heaven and join Christ. Nancy Pelosi, of course, demanded that the Attorney General show her the report. We don't need you interpreting for us. It was condescending. It was arrogant. The Oresteia is a trilogy of Greek tragedies written by Aeschylus in the 5th century BC. Concerning the murder of Agamemnon by Clytemnestra, the murder of Clytemnestra by Orestes, the trial of Orestes, the end of the curse of the house of Atreus, and the pacification of the Erinyes. So there you go. Sun Charters tweeted this of Big Ben. That kind of sums up Brexit. I previously said that the market is underpricing no deal Brexit risk. This is something that Draghi also reiterated to EU leaders. 25th of March, I said the whole Brexit scenario has become a needle which appears simply impossible to thread. JP Morgan, these are Treasury and Bund prices, very overbought, they're saying. I'm saying completely out of whack. And now this is
Robert
from
Mueller
Saturday Night Live, very funny interpretation. Robert Mueller
and Donald
finishes
Trump
his
tweets his
report,
reaction
William Barr
to the summary.
summarizes the report, and Donald Trump tweets his reaction to the summary. Giuliani. I guess I was a legal genius the whole time. And all of my mind games worked. If you want to know what my mind games were, you have to ask the family of goblins who lives in my head and holds open my eyes. Moving on, I still believe that, of course, there was interference. That goes back to the article I wrote on 5th of December 2016. We have a deviate tomahawk. This is a chart of the Turkish lira from Holga. I think it's going to be under significant pressure, particularly as Erdogan has no choice but to normalize interest rates. Check this out. Interest in moving to New Zealand has spiked since the Christchurch shooting, based on the amount of preliminary visas filed in 10 days after the shooting compared to 10 days before. The applicants are mostly from the US and from Muslim-majority countries. As I said on the 25th of March, from a geopolitical perspective, the big popping over the radar happened in Christchurch, New Zealand. I think she asserted narrative control over terror, the symbolism of a biker gang providing an escort to a hearse transporting the coffin of Haji Muhammad Dawood Nabi was very powerful. Her message that they are the publisher, not the postman, was also something that needed saying. And this was the pushback against what Don DeLillo described thus in Mao too. I used to think it was possible for an artist to alter the inner life of the culture. Now bomb makers and gunmen have taken that territory. And I said, if you want to measure a soft power leapfrog, keep an eye on the Kiwis and this remarkably sophisticated epitome of 21st century girl power, Jacinda Ardern. The Observer says two prime ministers on opposite sides of the world delivered sharply contrasting performances last week. In New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern found the strength and understanding to give voice to a wounded nation's horror and grief. Her address at a remembrance service in Christchurch for victims of the 15th March mosque attacks rose far above the merely dutiful. It was inspiring, consoling, defiant in equal measure. The answer lies in our humanity. We each hold the power in our words, in our actions, in our daily acts of kindness. Let that be the legacy of the 15th of March, she said. At their best, good leaders model the way, establish principles and goals, inspire a shared vision, open minds to new possibilities, challenge the process, find innovative, imaginative ways to change the status quo, enable others to act, empowerment, and encourage the heart, maintain hope and belief. Turning to Theresa May, 3 consecutive parliamentary defeats, the latest on Friday for a signature EU withdrawal deal, say all that is needed about Theresa May's political authority. These humiliations point to a more fundamental problem of leadership. Far from inspiring her cold and lofty personal style, disheartened and dismayed, May tried to dictate, not lead, with eyes and ears firmly closed, and has deservedly found only oblivion. I was reading an article in Open Culture about William Burroughs writing many years ago, something called the Revised Boy Scout Manual, and he describes the techniques he was proposing as being able to swamp the mass media with total illusion. This was a period when the My Lai massacre, the Manson family, and the Weather Underground were all in the news. The Zodiac killer was on the loose. A general air of bleakness prevailed. He said, you construct fake news broadcasts on video camera and you scramble your fabricated news in with actual news broadcasts. We might read in Burroughs' instructions the method of YouTube propagandists, social media manipulators, and some of the most powerful people in the world. These techniques could swamp the mass media with totally illusion, he writes. It will be seen that the falsifications in syllabic Western languages are in point of fact actual virus mechanisms. Let us say the message is fear. For this we take all the past fear shots of the subject we can collect or evoke. We cut these in with fear words and pictures, with threats, etc., etc. This is all acted out and would be upsetting enough in any case. Now let's try it scrambled and see if we get an even stronger effect. What would this effect be? One comparable to post-hypnotic suggestion? Who is the audience? And would they be a la Clockwork Orange, a captive one? Is this a cinematic experiment, mass media age occult ritual, compendium of practical magic for insider media adepts? That then jumped me to Vladislav Surkov and his theory of a constant state of destabilized perception. If you're interested in exploring that further, look at this Adam Curtis documentary called Shape Shifting. It's an excerpt from Hypernormalization. and saying this is Surkov, maintaining a constant state of destabilized perception, a strategy of power that keeps any opposition constantly confused. A sense of destabilized perception and constant confusion would aptly express the feelings of many Americans trying to fathom how Trump has come so far in this election. Burroughs again, smash the control images, smash the control machine. 11 a.m. March 31st, 2 PLAAF J-11 jets violated the long-held tacit agreement by crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait. It was intentional, reckless, provocative. We've informed regional partners and condemned China for such behavior. That's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Taiwan. And now we've learned that Trump is nearing the sale of new F-16V jets to Taiwan, a move seen as a huge shock to Beijing. Japan says the next Emperor Naruhito's era's name is Reiwa, effective May 1, when he takes the throne from his father. Shinzo Abe says the name is meant to reflect the spiritual unity of the Japanese people. He, of course, was somebody I met at TCAD, and in his presentation at TCAD he spoke about how Japan bears the responsibility of fostering the confluence of the Pacific and Indian Oceans.